What's going on, guys? My name is Rounded Tic Tac and welcome back to another video. Now that last Epoch has been out for a week or two, how is everybody feeling about the game? I'm absolutely loving it again, even though I've spent a decent amount of time pre-release playing this game. I've found my love for the game again, especially finding these new and super powerful characters, such as the one we're going to talk about today. It's nothing new, it's a normal Necromancer build, but we are using a specific new unique, and I want to showcase this build for you guys right now. I am on a never-ending quest to try to bring you clear and concise content, but man, is it difficult in a game like an ARPG. With so many skills, so many things to talk about, so many items to talk about, I'm going to do my absolute best to just talk about the important parts that you need to know about this build, and if it's not clear and concise enough that way, we'll change it up in the future. Let me know down in the comments below. I just have a quick question before we move on, and a quick thing to talk about before we move on, and that is, have you guys made an alternate character yet? And if so, what is your experience now that you know how the game is played? And the second thing to mention is, I know that a lot of people wanted to know how my Scorpion build held up in endgame, and that video is coming. The thumbnail for it is literally right, not here, but here, and that video is coming. What happened was I made that pre-release, and then I remade it on release, and it is now a cycle character. It is level 94, and it is clearing 160 to 200 corruption. I can't really remember exactly what it's doing, because I've been playing this character that is absolutely bonkers, crazy strong, and crazy broken, which is another video I do want to make about how the power discrepancy in this game is a little jarring from character to character. If you're interested in that, let me know down in the comments below. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the video and talk about this newish version of Necromancer using the brand new unique, the Harbor Wraith mask, and just how stupidly broken strong this build is. Let's jump into it. This is the first build guide I'm making that focuses around a unique item, so I figured let's talk about that unique item first and then go back to the items that we are searching for a little later in the video. That one unique item is going to be the brand new WraithLord's Harbor. The reason it's called this is because David Harbour, the cop from Stranger Things, is a fan of the game, and the devs decided to put a mask, an item in the game for him. I guess he enjoys Necromancer. The stats on the item are fine. We don't really need to talk about that. We need to talk about what this actually does. The WraithLord scales with your summon wraith tree and summons other wraiths for you while in combat. While at max wraiths, the WraithLord casts necrotic beams and regularly consumes all your non-wraith minions. And for this build, this little sentence is very important: to empower itself, gaining temporary maximum health and power for 10 seconds. Now, the thing about how they word this, I'm not sure exactly how this perk works. And what I mean by that is, I don't know if once you summon minions for it to consume, whether it consumes what it does at one time, and that one consumption of minions gives it health and power for 10 seconds. So whatever kind of minions you can get out with the fastest amount of time in one instance, that's where it gains its bonus from. Or if once it consumes something, a 10-second timer starts, and in that 10 seconds, as it consumes more minions, it gets more and more powerful. If I had to assume, which I think I'm correct, it is the latter and not the former. So keep that in mind. We are going to be trying to generate as many minions as we can while we're going through mapping and doing bosses. I have yet to see this item be built this way, where we're scaling minion damage or minions to it consume for bonus damage at an incredible rate, which also keeps survivability at an all-time high. It keeps your transplant ability at a 3-second cooldown. It allows you to cast minions on almost every other ability in the game, and I'm going to show you exactly how all of that comes together and why this build is so powerful. The other way I have seen this build work is people just use things like Dread Shade and Infernal Shade with Bone Curse to shred necrotic resistances and just let him cook. And I've also seen people do Bone Curse into Bone Prison, because Bone Prison counts as a minion for some reason. You stack a bunch of health on it and your WraithLord ends up with 2,500 extra health, and you basically just do it that way. The way I'm doing it is slightly different, and the reason why is, as with my first character ever, which was a necromancer, survivability became an issue going in higher and higher corruption. The reason for that is my minions in a non-WraithLord build would kill everything, but they wouldn't tank everything, and I had to spend my entire time kiting around waiting for my minions to kill the bigger enemies. This build, we don't have that problem. We have innate healing through one of our perk choices, which I'm going to show you, and we have all of our defensive perks that we could possibly ever need, with a ton of spam of minions, and every time these minions die, we heal as well. So let's just jump into the skills, and I'll talk to you exactly what we need, just the basics, and make sure the points that we're taking are the ones that are worth talking about. Otherwise, just follow along on the tree and or the link down in the description below for the last Epoch guide. So let's start with Infernal Shade, and here what this does in a general sense is normally it's a damage over time ability for enemies. We're going to turn it as a damage over buff ability for our minions. Since we're only relying on one minion, this allows us to continue to buff our damage a lot. We're going to take Devour in Flames here, and we're shooting for Manic Pyre, which allows our minion to get increased cast speed, which is a main stat we are looking for in this build. The only other thing to really note is this is fine to grab Soulfire, so we don't have to cast Infernal Shade nearly as much, and then Corrosion for just some armor shred. That's really the main purpose of this, is Corrosion, Manic Pyre, and Soulfire. Moving on from there, let's talk about its cousin, Dreadshade, which is a very similar ability, since we're only working with one minion, Dreadshade works amazing for us. We want to come down here and we want to grab Dying Coven for, again, the increased cast speed. You're going to see a theme on increased cast speed. We're going to go up here for more damage, 60% extra damage. Then we're going to grab this for more cast speed. Even though it makes our minions blind, it does not matter. Then we come down here for All for One. This allows our Dreadshade to just be able to be casted on our giant WraithLord, because that's all we're using. And then Egoism is another very important perk to have, which makes our minion, our one WraithLord, always crit. And then I went up here and I used Doomed Wrath to gain 45% more damage. I've seen other people grab Deadlock, but I don't think this works the way it says it works. I think it only taunts for 4 seconds when you cast Dreadshade, and since ours is now an 18-second cooldown, a 4-second taunt is rarely going to keep us alive. So I decided not to get that and go up here and grab Doomwrath instead. For our WraithLord ability, we have to talk specifically about Locust of Death in just a minute. But what we are grabbing here is just all the multiplicative damage stuff and additive damage stuff that we can get. Sequel of Avarice is huge for us. We also want Necrotic Hunger. This is super duper important because the Necrotic Health Leech. So normally your Wraiths would hit for, let's just hypothetically say, 1,000 damage a swing, and they're healing 15% of that. Now our WraithLord is hitting for 38,000 a hit and healing 15% of that. So this, combined with another passive node in our tree, allows our WraithLord to full heal from every single thing that he hits in the game. This adds so much healing into the character that it's just silly how tanky he becomes. Down here, we want the crit multiplier with Dusk of the Living. As I said, we're trying to stack this and cast speed as high as we can possibly get. Locust of Death is something we need to talk about, however, because I don't recommend getting this while leveling. I recommend getting this at the end game. To make this work, you need a special perk on your boots, an experimental perk. The AI for the WraithLord is kind of shit, and this helps it in the end game, but it also takes a bit of a learning curve to use correctly. So keep that in mind while you're leveling. Maybe not take this perk, but once you get to the end game, definitely take this perk. It ends up being better. It just has a learning curve to understand. Now let's talk about Transplant, and this is where this build differentiates from other ones just a little bit. The main thing to take away from here is 90% of the time, Transplant is going to look very similar to what I built here. People who are using the curse version of this build, usually come down here and grab this. But since we are not using curse, what we're doing instead is grabbing Ivory Court. And that allows us every time to use transplant that we summon 3 more minions that our WraithLord can feast on. Besides that, we're just getting health regeneration, cooldown reduction, and haste. These are the most important ones, along with sticky blood to get a little bit of healing. And lastly, the main thing that differentiates this build from any other build of this same caliber is we are running volatile zombies. This build originated from the idea of using the new ring. I forget the name. I'll put it on the screen right now, where you can summon a zombie off of a death of a zombie. The issue with using this ring, which we did try originally with the build, is that it auto loops and the WraithLord never attacks anything. It just continues to consume zombie after zombie after zombie, and it will never attack because it's busy consuming, because the consumption aspect of the WraithLord overwrites doing damage. We use that to our advantage, and I'll talk about that in a little while, but that is the idea why we're not using that ring, but that is the idea where this build came from. So with that being said, we're gonna grab Dreadful Horde, and this allows us every time we use the ability to cast 5 zombies every single time. And then we're gonna get Vile Force, which gives us a parasite, 2 of them per death. So this is 5 zombies plus 10 parasites every time. So that's 15 things that we are consuming whenever we use our volatile zombies. And we have 2 ways to proc this, which we'll talk about once we get to the items. The only other things that I really think are important here are switching this to Mark of Death so we can get some necrotic shred resistance, grabbing this and turning it into necrotic damage, which is super important for us because we don't really stack fire, and the only other plus damage type we get is necrotic, so why not? And we're coming down here to make it as big as we possibly can, getting something like Rite of the Grave, which gives us no longer movement zombies, but it doesn't matter because they get consumed immediately the second they spawn. And then the survivability aspect of this build comes from necromantic fervor, which allows us to heal from every single zombie death. So we'll be able to weave in our zombies from 2 different portions, and every time they get consumed, every single zombie gives us 0.8 of our health, which adds up to a decent amount. I think the parasites as well give us healing, but I'm not 100% sure on that. What I did do earlier in the build is I grabbed Shepherd of Thralls, but I've yet to run into an issue with damage on this build. But if we ever do get to that point, I'd probably swap some things around and get Shepherd of Thralls for even more minion consumption. Or that is the skill list and exactly what we're using and why it all works together. Let's move on to the passive tree and let's just talk about the important ones. So for the passive tree, we're going to take 21 points in Acolyte. We are looking for things like Vitality because we do more than enough damage. We are looking for crit damage. We get some resistances where we need it. And we are also looking for cast speed. Those are the main key components that we need for this build. So we grab things like Dark Rituals, Stolen Vitality for more health, and Intelligence scales everything for a Necromancer, and it gives us a little bit of necrotic resistance. Now for here, this is something I also did a little differently. Since we are using potions in this build, and again, we'll talk about why, we decided to try out Elixir of Hunger. What this does is give 10% increased cast speed when you use a potion, and with 5 points, it lasts 5 seconds. We are going to be spamming potions a lot to keep up our zombies, so this is a buff that's literally up almost all the time. We're getting here for more cast speed. We're getting Risen Army for even more cast speed. We're getting Cursed Blood for increased necrotic damage. This is 200% armor shred for our minions, which is exactly what we want on this build. When we're coming all the way over here and we're getting Tyrant for more increased health. We're getting Cling to Life for more resistance for our minions, even though it's not a huge deal. And the vitality for us, you can see we're at like 200 health or 2000 health at the moment. And then some important perks to talk about at the end here, which are frantic summons. Again, we can see the cast speed, which is what we need. We're grabbing Moonlight Pyre. This increases our necrotic damage at a baseline. We're going for Rite of Undeath. This is increased minion necrotic damage. Plus, it gives us resistances that we need in the build so we can stack health and stunned avoidance and things like that instead of more resistances. And then these last two perks are very, very important to talk about because this is a huge crit multiplier for our WraithLord, which allows him to hit these crazy numbers. And then Veins of Malice. Every 10 seconds, you grant your minions haste and frenzy, and it lasts for 5 seconds, which you'll see in the footage of us hitting really, really fast for absolutely no reason. This is the reason. Then right now, I've just been stacking points here where this increases our dam chance on minions and increased necrotic damage. I don't think this is completely necessary. And again, this character is almost max level. So you most likely will not get here with your points allocated, but that is definitely what you want to use. We're looking again for crit multiplier, cast speed, and survivability. The last thing we need to talk about, obviously, is the items. We have the helmet. We talked about that. The best amulet in the game for minion builds is probably going to be the Death Rattle because this allows us to, again, have that minion critical strike multiplier. I was able to get somewhat lucky on here and got 125% increased minion damage, and that allows us to hit even harder. For your chest piece, you can run this 2 different ways. You can run this as something like this, increased necrotic damage and plus summon Wraith, or if you're dying a lot, you can take a Titan Heart and use it here with a 2-handed weapon to get the 15% damage decrease. For your main weapon, feel free to use something like this. We are looking for minion spell damage. This is one of the rare things that can double stack like this. I have increased necrotic damage on this, and this gives us the great inherent perks, the implicit perks that we are looking for. You can 100% get away with using a shield on this build. It does more than enough damage to get you by. Now, I think there is a cap on cast speed for minions. Don't hold me to that, but I tried a bunch of different versions of this build with different items, such as Julra's Obsession and the Reach of the Grave for an increase of 32% increased cast speed, and you can see it on your screen now. I didn't really see a difference. However, maybe it's not working in the arena area to test on dummies. Regardless of that, this build works just as fine. Just get something with block effectiveness or block chance, and just this will allow you to live longer in the harder zones. For your rings, you probably want something like the turquoise ring for that, again, that minion critical strike multiplier. However, since we're also using a cooldown volatile zombie skill, getting a opal ring is just as good. Again, you're looking for minion damage as your key perk. Now, this is an important part of the build. Right here is the experimental perk of 3 volatile zombies summoned on potion use, and we get a base 33% increased minion damage. This belt is decent, but that experimental perk can definitely roll higher, up to, I believe, 5, which all in all, if we use summon zombie and a potion, that's 30 minions our WraithLord's eating in less than a second, which allows him to scale his damage to ridiculous numbers. If you do not have a Julra's Obsession with cast speed and the base spell damage, I'm using something simple like this because I need the critical strike avoidance and the void resistance, and we are just looking for intelligence and minion damage and some health. These rolled kind of poorly. Our boots is the other thing that we need to talk about because that also has the experimental perk of your minions teleport to you with a movement skill. That allows us to move our WraithLord, if we chose the stationary perk, to follow along with us as we move across the map, so we don't have to constantly cast it and then recast Dreadshade, etc., etc. Lastly, we are using the Decaying Homunculus of Life, and this just gives us minion necrotic damage. There is also one that gives you, I believe, minion move speed and minion damage as well, so either one of those is completely fine to use. I believe it's called the other one you can use is the Ruined Bones, and this gives us minion damage, minion movement speed, which we don't need, and minion health that we don't really need. So either one of these or the Decaying Homunculus, feel free to grab for your build. And then last but not least, let's talk about our idols. I personally am just stacking health and whatever little resistances I do happen to need. And then I decided to try to stack stun avoidance. I don't know if it's working. Ours is pretty damn high for a necromancer build, and I feel like I do get stunned less, and you really only die in this build when you get stunned. So I tried to stack it and it seems to be working for us. So that's kind of what we're going for. And then over here we have increased cooldown to transplant with some increased damage to volatile zombies. Since we only can move our big wraith with a teleport, we try to get that down as low as possible. I just need the other ones, otherwise I'd be running 2. That is the build. That is the gist of it. The last thing I want to do is just show you a quick run through a quick monolith and just talk about what I'm doing so you guys can see it in action. This build has a lot of moving parts, and I feel like watching it live and seeing how it's played is a lot better to eat and easier to understand than just me playing random clips in the background. So let's go into a monolith and we'll do something somewhat easy, and just I'll be able to show you exactly how this build works. As we load into a map, all we're going to do is we're going to cast our WraithLord. We're going to throw Infernal Shade on him and Dread Shade on him. And you can see his health start to tick down, but that's not a huge deal for us. You can also see how he doesn't follow us because we have the perk of Locus of Death where he can no longer move, but that is why we have the experimental perk on our boots. So without even summoning anything for him to consume, he's already hitting for 10k a hit, which at level 120 corruption, which this mission is more than enough to one-shot every single enemy that he comes across. Now, when things get harder, the gameplay loop is something more along the lines of summon the WraithLord, buff him up, and then cast zombies and use a potion, and you can see him consume everything, and now he's hitting for 50k a hit. As we move, he moves with us, and he instantly kills almost anything that we come across. All of that cast speed, all of that crit damage that we picked in our passive tree allows him to, even though he's only killing 3 things at a time, allows him to just wipe the floor. There was a boss there, I couldn't tell, of everything that's in the game. In fact, these enemies have so little health with this build at this level. He's having a hard time staying alive because he kills everything so quickly that he can't life leech off everything. There we go. He's back to full health, as I said. The other thing about this playstyle is every time we use Summon Zombie, we get a heal from him consuming the zombie. And since we can do that on our potions, it allows us to get basically like a double potion tick going. The other thing to note is his range of his necrotic beams is not the same range as his ability to consume minions. Now, if I was about here, this would be his range of his necrotic beams. However, if I was to go down to somewhere like here and use my zombies, he will kill my zombies at a much further rate than he would, as you can see right there, than he would from being able to shoot his necrotic beams. So keep that in mind. What ends up happening, especially late game, is I'll be teleporting around the map, transplanting around the map, and get myself in a dicey situation in a group full of mobs, and I will just use my zombies. He'll kill the zombies, and that zombie explosion will also kill the enemies, like you can just see what happened right there. That does start to fall off when these enemies have a crap ton of health. However, since our zombies also heal us, it's a nice way to be able to get some extra health. Plus, they shred necrotic resistances, and you end up with damage like that. Our Dread Shade fell off, so he's no longer critting, but that is the general gameplay of this build. As you can see, this is a level 120 empowered corruption, which is nothing crazy, but it works quite well in that instance. Let me jump into... And that's the build, guys. That is what you're going to be playing with and exactly how it works. You can scale this damage incredibly fast and incredibly high really quickly. The last thing to show you is just how I use this build for high level bosses. We're going to load in, we're going to summon our Wraith, we're going to buff him with Dread and WraithLord, and then we're going to have him eat as many zombies as we can using our potions, and then teleporting into the actual boss and that allows his damage to be stacked to ridiculous degrees, and this is an already dead boss before I can finish this sentence. So that is the build. That is exactly how you play it in high-end corruption or just farming. Look for the perks that you need on this build to make it really start to slap. I pushed this as hard as I possibly could or wanted to, and it can definitely go higher. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys on the next one. Scorpionox build coming soon, and have a great day. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really helps out the channel. See you guys on the next one. TikTok out.